Hey everybody, Adam Perry here with TrueDFS, and I am lucky enough to have a special guest, James McCool, here with me. Although I have to say, James is luckily not that special because he's been appearing a lot on our stuff, so we're lucky to have him yet again. We're going to build some lineups using the PayDirt models. Before we do, like and subscribe. Check out TrueDFS.com because if you like what you see in this video, you'll get access to all of it. And you can get trials and a lot more. So there's a lot of good stuff. So check it out. And yeah, with that, I'll ship it over to James.
Hi, I'm James. Yeah, I've been on a couple times with Sheets and Bobby lately. This is the first time that I've gotten to be on with Adam. We are going to be going over some of the PayDirt stuff, which is live, obviously, at PayDirtDFS.com. But then also you can access all this stuff over at TrueDFS. Through our partnership. So happy to do a little bit more fleshing out of the tools. I recognize that the PayDirt suite of tools is not just as simple and straightforward as a lot of the other things that you'll find in the industry, right? I don't utilize just a single point of interest with medians or anything like that. I build out full range of outcomes models and some other tools that help you make better decisions. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. So we're likely not going to be able to cover everything in this video, but we will cover a couple things as it pertains to building lineups for the main slate. So happy to do that.
Let's go for it. I've got the range of outcomes up here, and I also have, I think I have here scoring percentages. Now, my big question is it possible to not play after? I have to see which one I had up. Was it the Stack Finder or one of these where it was like, you got to play Washington? Like it is like, oh yeah, here it is. Washington Day. Runs per dollar. I mean, they're crushing it, over 0.3 more than anyone else. The runs, the medians at 6.24. The ownership is right. I mean, is this just a Washington slate? And is this a Kirby fade slate?
So first things first, see how all the ownership say 80%? Click that little load reset data button in the top left.
All right.
Right next to select view advanced.
Am I going rerun here?
Go over to the left, that load reset data button.
Okay.
Hit that one. There you go.
Boom.
All right. So obviously Washington's still at the top here. However, they are very low owned. One of the things that I preach over at PayDirt is that you should not be building lineups assuming that you know what is going to happen. You should be building lineups to help you win a GPP, right? Or, make money one way or another. I guess if you're playing cash games, then you don't have to care about winning. You just have to care about being over that halfway point, right? So a lot of what it comes down to when you're building lineups, it's not always about just picking the team that the models think is going to do best. Because if you choose Washington, which is fine, we'll get to how you use them soon, understand that you're going to have an extremely volatile outcome. If you stack a team that is only 26% owned in some, you're either placing first or last. You are not placing anywhere like in the middle range of things because you have such low ownership on your stack that you're likely going to be placing towards the top or the bottom, whether they do good or bad. The reason for that is because relative value matters. And the less people that have something, the more it moves you if you have it. So with Washington, yes, they look like an awesome play in large field. Maybe they look like an awesome play as a secondary stack. But in small field, I'm more inclined to use a Seattle stack, which has higher sum ownership, which is something that I look for, something that I care about, and is going to give me less volatility on my lineups. Now, when we go through and look at the way to actually put together lineups using these tools, I will talk a little bit more about volatility stuff, but just know lower ownership is better for large field or for relative value if you're eating a lot of ownership at pitchers. So that's the way that I look at Washington. I'm not super, I mean, they look like a good play. I'm happy to play them. I think that George Kirby is going to suck for a little while coming off the IR. The models agree, but I'm not going to just default to using them in everything just because they have good baselines and good runs per dollar. Like I want to look at the way to build for the tournaments that I'm playing.
Okay, great. So let me ask you this. How did we know that Seattle, how do we know from this that Seattle has a sort of safer, less ceiling, less floor, but more of a kind of median middle range outcome besides the ownership?
So it's all about the ownership here.
Okay.
So let me talk through that a little bit for a second. So
Yeah, please do.
say that, and this is just like roster construction stuff, right? Say that you have a contest where, say that you're playing a 50-50, right? And 50% of the people in the contest cash and 50% do not cash. You, Adam, what do you think that your goal is for that contest? Like, where do you want to land? Like, where do you want to place in that contest?
Basically in 51 and above.
Yes, you want to place 50 fucking first and no farther, right? Just because like you don't get paid for placing first. You don't get any extra money for placing 10th rather than 51st, right? So you don't have any added benefit of passing any more of the field, right? So you can think about the ownership that you have in a lineup as to an expectation of where you are likely to finish in a contest. Now, ownership is a representation of the amount of people that have something that you also have. So if you have Seattle, it's not necessarily speaking to their range of outcomes. Like their range of outcomes, if you look at their runs scored and their win percentage and their top score percentage, stuff like that, I mean, you can see that they are likely going to finish with A+ runs 21% of the time. Their average runs is 5.2. Like you can see all these different things about their expectations. But if what you're looking at is saying, I want to win a GPP, I have to play in a way that helps me win that GPP. And one of the things about that is lowering volatility. Seattle with higher ownership makes it so, say that you have, a lower owned pitcher, right? So you have 5% owned pitcher. If you have a 5% owned pitcher, you already have plenty of upside to pass large swaths of the field if that pitcher does well. So do you really want to also have 26% owned some ownership Washington, where you also need another thing that nobody else has to go your way? The reason why you lower your volatility with ownership is because you need less things to go your way. And you can kind of say, okay, the field thinks this is a good decision, just going to outsource there. I have my leverage through my pitcher or through my secondary stack or whatever. I don't need to also be right about fading Seattle. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about lowering your volatility. You increase your volatility with lower ownership. You decrease your volatility with higher ownership. Makes it so you have to get less things right.
Perfect. Got it. Great. So, okay, let's say we're playing the 121. It's a single entry. Seattle looks good. Where do we go next in the tools? Do we go look for some pitchers in the pitcher range of outcomes? Do we get right to the hand builder? Do we look at optimal rates? Where do we go? Or is it on a different sheet? Is it the stack finder? Is it
Yeah, so I think you can do a couple things once you go from there. The first thing that I'm going to do after I've looked at the scoring percentages, like, okay, so we've looked at this and we know just looking at this, Washington looks good from a value perspective, but they're low owned. Seattle looks good from a value perspective. They're high owned. So we're kind of like, all right, well, maybe we want to pair Seattle and Washington. Right? Maybe that's what we want to do. So let's go over to the player ROO now. And let's take a look at pitchers, right? So let's look at just after you look at this, Adam, tell me what you think of the pitchers and what sticks out.
So, there's three guys sticking out, two a little above the rest. We've got Boyd against Colorado and at about 19 fantasy points. Hunter Green at about 19.6, a little less than him. Then you're like this other tier with Clark Schmidt at 18 and then a bunch of 16s and 15s. So really it's Boyd, Green, maybe Clark Schmidt. And now if we look at their ownership, Clark Schmidt is the chalky one.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if we went with the Washington 5-man, maybe in the Seattle 3 or the Seattle 2, something like that. Maybe we could eat the Clark Schmidt. But otherwise, I don't know. I mean, 37, 36%, it's high. We might want to dip lower if we're playing the Seattles as the main. So you got Kikuchi down there at 15%, and then a bunch of guys under 10%. So you ask what stands out. That's a bunch of things. But,
and all that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So what we have is Boyd and Green who kind of like are the top overall projections. Granted, they are, more expensive, but their 2x and their 3x are still fine, right? That's something that we look at as well. They look like they are decent values for the price. On top of that, we have Clark Schmidt. Clark Schmidt looks like he's going to be like the Giga Chalk. He's probably going to be 50, 60% owned or something. He's the one that we're really making a decision around. Because if you don't play Clark Schmidt, you can kind of just do whatever you want to do on this slate. He's going to be 60-something% owned. He's 7,700. That's a clear misprice against the Angels. Like, you're making a decision around Clark Schmidt, and that's basically it on this slate. So after that, we kind of have this group of dudes, Kikuchi, Lauer, and Gordon, who are all priced well, right? I mean, like Lauer looks like he's underpriced here. 71% 2x rate, 28% 3x rate. Looks good. Underpriced and underowned. So if we wanted to play a Seattle stack, that's totally fine. We could start with a Seattle stack and Clark Schmidt and then just use Eric Lauer at 10% owned. And it's like, there you go. Like that's where you can just start your lineup. So this is all information that I like to gain. I primarily use the player range of outcomes for pitchers. I like to know as I am looking at their range of outcomes and I'm looking at their ownership and I'm looking at their 2x and 3x rates, like what is it that really sticks out to me? And what sticks out to me is that the models like the chalk. The chalk is, they dominate those top 3 spots, right? Like everybody is on those top 3 guys. So that's great. That's good. That's fine. It looks like good chalk. And then we also have a couple lower owned guys and cheaper guys that we can pivot to if we want to, right? Like we have Eric Lauer. We even have arguably Kikuchi is a totally fine pivot off of Clark Schmidt. Like if you didn't get that 7,700, it's totally fine to go with Kikuchi, who projects for a couple points lower, but you notice that his 2x and his 3x rates are comparable. And at 15% owned, next to 60% owned, that seems fine to me. So that's what I would look at. I look at this and say, okay, the model's like the chalk. That's good. That's great. That's grand. There are also some cheaper, lower owned guys that we can institute if we would like to, that allow us to have some extra relative value and allow us to eat Seattle chalk if we would really like to do so.
Yeah, just for some qualitative color. I mean, you've got Boyd against Colorado, which is like the nut matchup. You got a big name in green, and then you got a bunch of guys,
Yeah.
I mean, Clark Schmidt, Kikuchi, Lauer, I mean, they're all just like a dime a dozen, right? And they're separated by not much. So that totally makes sense what you're saying. I'm not like a no ball type, but qualitatively that also tracks, I would say.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and also if you look, there are those columns for team total and opponent total. Like the totals against Kikuchi, Lauer, and Gordon are high. I mean, 5.53 against Kikuchi, 4.95 for Lauer, and 6.05 for Gordon. Right, like that. Those are pretty high team totals, all things considered. But the prices mitigate those problems, right? I mean, we're not projecting these guys to be world beaters, projecting them for 15, 16 fantasy points, and what you gain here, especially like if you go with, and we'll talk about direct leverage here in a sec, but Tanner Gordon is direct leverage against the chalkiest team as well, because the Cubs look to be the highest owned team tonight.
Right.
So if you were to use Tanner Gordon, what you would want to do is lock in Clark Schmidt and a Seattle stack, because like, man, you have this direct leverage against the Cubs stack. You absolutely do not need any more leverage. You should be looking to eat as much ownership as you possibly can if you lock in Tanner Gordon.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing to note as well.
So what does GPP percentage mean? I'm in this column here. Is this like Gordon is showing up a little bit compared to these other guys who just are dark red?
Yeah, GPP percentage is based on their price. It's kind of one step above a 4x rate. So
okay.
It's how often do they meet their threshold as a pitcher that is usually necessary on a value basis to win GPP.
It makes sense too. I mean, I was thinking about it like, okay, if it's more than 4x, like how much is big? I was thinking like, does it have anything to do with the direct leverage? Maybe not, but he offers you that as well as a little bit extra on the GPP side of things. So cool. Okay, so we've got some knowledge now on the pitchers. Mm-hmm. We've got an idea about stacks. Mm-hmm. Do we go over to the hand builder?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So let's start with a stack maybe. So we want to go like team filters. Do we want Seattle? Are we going Seattle?
Can I show you something cooler?
Please do.
Okay, close down that team filters.
Okay.
And go to quick fill instead.
Oh, boom.
Yeah. So choose your Seattle stack. Choose a
Seattle.
5-man autofill.
Do a 5-man. No, we don't necessarily have to play 5-mans today.
No, you don't. But just a,
mid wrap around. Okay.
I would go top 1 through 5 if I'm just looking to start somewhere.
Okay, cool. I like it. Quick fill.
And then if you go down, you'll see that it auto-filled 1 through 5.
I love it. We got ownerships here. Okay. So now we can't really do that with Washington, right? Because the positions might not work.
Well, maybe. I mean, let's so go up to the team filters now. You can do a quick fill here, or I usually start with team filters now after I've done my first quick fill.
Right.
So once you click on any of the teams,
right.
Those out.
I know we can't do it. We probably can't do another quick fill, right? Because
you could. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what fills in, right? Like it'll fill in whatever the available spots are.
Okay, let's see. Washington, quick fill. See if we can get a 3-man. We'll try and get the top.
So it looks like we get Nathaniel Lowe and James Wood. So yeah, I mean, we get those guys, and then second base actually Luis Garcia at 5 in the order. That works just fine.
Yeah, there we got a game stack too.
Yeah.
All right, so we pull Garcia in.
Yeah.
All right. So now we've got a low-owned 3-man, a high-owned Seattle 5-man. I say we could take a chalk pitcher and maybe one Lauer type, Gordon type, something like that.
You could probably, for small field, you could probably take both chalk pitchers here.
You think so?
So I would say for small field, I would start with Green and Boyd, and then see what we have in that. I would prefer to go Green and Boyd here.
Okay. So, yeah, let me ask you that. How much do we care about ownership here versus just them having a higher median projection?
Ooh, actually, it looks like we're not able to go. I mean, that's over salary, right?
We sure are. A lot over salary.
So let's see.
Let's see what we
can get Lauer.
Yeah, let's see.
That's Lauer a pretty good lineup.
Right there.
Yeah, it's a pretty good lineup.
Yeah, we got it.
You could even go, if you wanted to, you could probably get Schmidt here instead of Boyd. We would then want to upgrade somewhere with our stack, though, because that would be leaving quite a bit.
So what happens? We go Schmidt for Boyd here. Boom. We got Lauer. Okay, so we've got $800.
I mean, I would still be fine with playing that in.
Yeah, I mean, we're not giving up too much salary, right?
No.
And the median seems pretty good still. 800 left over, pretty viable. We've got 1 through 5. We've got 2, 3, 5 on Washington. We got a game stack. We got the late night hammer.
Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. You get plenty of ownership. You have some leverage pieces, multiple leverage pieces, actually. I think that looks pretty good.
Okay. So I was going to segue. I mean, I had a question about the betting, but maybe first, could we talk a little bit about the Sims?
Yeah.
So could we take, so when I go to the Sims, it's seeding lineups. Is that correct? And simulating them against each other? Do I understand that right?
Yeah. So the process here is on the back end, I am creating what I call a seed frame. And it's creating a whole bunch of lineups. I create somewhere between 12 and 20 million lineups on the back end. And then I send the best 5 million of them over to a database. And then as we are going to start to create this, it will pull down a random selection of 500,000 of them. And that's an important point really quick, is that it's a random selection of 500,000 out of the 5 million lineups that are sitting in the database. And what it does then is it will simulate the lineups against each other. And then every time that it does a simulation, it picks out the winner and adds it to what is called a winner's frame. And it does that 1,000 times. So then you get 1,000 lineups out of those 500,000 simulations of the 500,000 lineups that are random from the 5 million lineups that are random from the seed frames. Now, this is a different approach than how a lot of the contest sim stuff works in the industry, because they do not randomize the field every single time.
Right.
They maintain a consistent field, which means that you will have consistent results. That is not the case with these seed frames. If you run, for instance, a large average field, I can almost guarantee you that the results will be like noticeably different between each individual run. I usually run small and sharp only because I play things like the 333 or the 555 or, whatever the higher dollar contests. So I would like to see what I'm up against. But and these results will be the results will be more narrow in this setting. But for most people, if you're simulating like a large contest, you should expect the results of every single individual instance of that contest to be different, because there's a lot of volatility within them.
Yeah.
So my belief on this stuff and my approach on it is a little bit different than what the industry does. These run a little bit differently, right? And you'll see a little bit of different lineups. Now, the main thing that I always take away from the contest sims, and this is across the board for MLB, NBA, Showdown, blah, 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 whatever, right? I care more about what it is telling me about the players that are involved in the lineups than I do the lineups themselves. I never use the lineups from the contest sim.
Okay, ever. Why is that?
So for me, the way that I build lineups, and we can talk about like if you wanted to use the lineups from the seed frame, it's totally fine, but you can use the optimals that are found in the range of outcomes rather than the optimals from this. The thing about it is that when these lineups simulate against each other, remember, this is a random assortment of lineups that are plausible, but not optimal. You are not getting the what is considered the global maxima of lineups based on the projections by using the contest sims. This is simply to check plausibility of lineups and the players involved in those plausible lineups against each other to find out who is the most valuable amongst the players involved in the lineups. The other caveat, as I'm talking about all these things, is that these lineups are meant to be representing the field, which means that they are, I use the word plausible, not optimal here, because they're created more or less on ownership, likely of lineups being created, rather than optimality, likely of lineups winning the contest. Big difference between those two things.
Right.
So when you see these things, what you'll see is if somebody is super low owned, they probably won't show up in like a small, sharp run, right? Because we expect when you build a small, sharp field that it's going to likely be the lineups that are higher owned, the players that are higher owned in them. So it's information about that. The lower owned players will show up a little bit more in larger fields, but for the most part, we're not using this to get information about low owned plays. We're using this about information on how to approach the fields.
All right. So with that all in mind, so what if, we build our lineup by hand? Do you ever go to this and say, okay, let's see where those players come up. Let's see, if the Lauer comes up, a ton, is he more valuable than we thought? Is the Seattle stat coming up? Is something like that?
Yeah, mostly what I want to do. So go ahead and run a very small vary here.
Okay.
And just run
so small vary. There's a little bit of art to this, not just science, right? I'm thinking the 121 is small above average.
I'd agree with that. Yep.
It's single entry, so you still get a lot. It's a pretty casual, somewhat appealing to casual kind of field. I'm thinking small above average.
Yep, I agree with that.
And we're running.
So then it's pretty quick. And so, like I said, here are the lineups, right? So we see Seattle, Washington, Cincinnati, Seattle, Washington, Cincinnati, Seattle. We got lineups that we would expect to get here. Now, note really quick that there is a lineup that spent $45,000 in salary, $46,000 in salary, $47,000 in salary, and that's the main reason why I don't use these lineups.
Right. Because these were like the nut lineup in the sim.
Right.
Basically. Yeah.
Right. So these were lineups that won the simulations any given amount of times, and
we don't need to win.
Right. They're sorted by GPP projection, which is a mix of how many points they scored which is the fantasy column there, and the amount of points that they were projected for, which is the projection column there. And what that tells you is basically like this lineup projected for 100 points. It scored 139 when it won the GPP. So within expectation would be something like 119. Very basic math on that. But we can see that we do have, Seattle, Cincinnati, Washington. We have some New York Yankees on there, which I think are going to get some ownership, right? So we have things that we expect. We also have Hunter Green and Matthew Boyd and Clark Schmidt. We do have some Eric Lauers. See, a little bit of Eric Lauer there.
Yeah,
so guys that we would expect, right? So then if you go below that, you go down like below that frame.
Yep.
So now we can see some other things. We can see some information about the lineups that won the contests. So this is information about this whole winning frame. The average salary used was $48,134. The average projection that won was 95. Average ownership of the lineups that won was 174. The average fantasy, like the average winning score for a lineup, was 132. And the average GPP projection was 113. We can also see some standard deviations. And then if you click on that stack type statistics over just above that, then this will tell you the lineup types that were used the vast majority of the time. So 4-man stacks and 3-man stacks were used the vast majority of the time in terms of the winning lineups. Now that's a feature, not a bug. You see that 5-man stack only won once. It's because it's a short slate. The bigger the slate, the more likely it is that a 5-man stack wins it. The smaller the slate, the more likely that a 4-man or a 3-man stack wins it, just because of the dynamics of how stacks work. Bobby has been saying very often, he's been very, very vocal that he's not using 5-man stacks on small slates. And I agree with that. The data bears that out. That makes sense. So again, contest sims also bear that out, right? 4-man stacks win vast majority of the time. Now, it is worth saying that the average projection of a 5-man stack is higher. The average fantasy output of a 5-man stack is higher, 133 versus 126. But that's to be expected, right? If a 5-man stack wins, it's because that team scored a shit ton of runs. Therefore, it is likely to have more runs distributed between the players. But it doesn't win as often because the less teams there are on a slate, the less opportunities there are for a team to score a shit ton of runs.
Yeah. So maybe we need to rethink our hand build. And that's what we got from it.
Yep.
So now, last thing, we got overall exposure. So this is just the players that come up the most, I assume.
Yep.
So we learned something. Is Cincinnati comes up quite a bit.
If you go to the team exposures there instead of overall exposures.
Yeah, there they are.
Yep.
More than the Washington. Now we'd have to go back and see what the ownership looks like.
So Cincinnati ownership is at 83% in the current aggregate.
Okay.
So
that's like in between Seattle and Washington. Or was Washington about 80?
Washington was 26.
26. Why did I think? Oh, that was before we did the reload. Yeah. Okay, so Washington's 26. So we're somewhere in between, kind of, with the Cincinnati's.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I like that. Correlate them with Hunter Green. And now, does it say anything about correlation within lineups or within players, or does that just all bear out as these sims run?
So you can kind of see down in the player exposures, you can kind of see like what guys are mostly used from individual teams.
Yeah.
If you go down and you saw that like Tyler Stephenson is there, go over to the overall exposures.
Yeah,
Stevenson, catcher. Like who's used, right? Connor Stephenson, Connor Joe, Tyler Stephenson, Santiago Espinal, third base, right? Like,
yeah,
these guys get used. It's a lot of infield for Cincinnati, and it's the cheaper guys, and that makes sense, right? Like for 3,900, 2,400, and 3,600 for those guys, you're paying a really low price, which means that you can afford Matthew Boyd and Hunter Green. That's probably the big reason why Cincinnati is showing up is actually because of Matthew Boyd and Hunter Green being so valuable. Whereas Clark Schmidt is less valuable. As you can see, projected ownership 51%, exposure 38%. He's over-owned by about 13%. Quick caveat on that. people usually see that negative and they're just like, oh, I can't play Clark Schmidt. You can absolutely still play Clark Schmidt. Like if you play, think about the overall edge of your lineup as one big equation. You just want to be in the positive. You just want to be in the black on a full lineup. So like if you play Clark Schmidt and Hunter Green together, you're already fine. Like you've already covered the negative from Clark Schmidt with the positive from Hunter Green there. So you don't have to get away from Clark Schmidt. You just have to make sure that you balance it out. That's a really big thing in Showdown. I'm sure that we'll talk about that when NFL season is around. People will look at it and be like, oh, I can't play this guy because he has a negative edge. It's like, yeah, you can. You just gotta, figure out a way to balance it out. Now maybe you can't play like multiple guys with negative 15% edge. Maybe you don't want to do that. But you can play one guy. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
So last question, and then we'll get out of here. One of the things I struggle with, I don't hand build a lot. And one of the things I struggle with is when I decide on a stack, there are still opportunity costs at certain positions that may mean I want more outfielders or I want more infielders. Now I know that there's a tool for that, but I don't quite know how to use it or where it is. But I think you've got something going on that could help me with that.
Yeah, go back to the range of outcomes.
Okay.
And this is actually a relatively new addition to the range of outcomes.
Are we okay? Let's
Sorry about that. But so if you click instead of simple, go to advanced. See that stack prio?
Stack prio.
It's right next to average salary. So that is going to tell you what positions it is mostly using in your main stack pieces. So it is hard to do two infielders together. Washington plus Seattle is going to be difficult. And you can see that if you go over to the hand builder and try to build them together, won't work. There's just not enough flexibility. It's much easier to stack an infield prio team with an outfield prio team.
Got it.
So a Washington with a Chicago Cubs, a Seattle with a New York Yankees. That does not mean that you cannot stack them together. There are absolutely ways to do it. But if you're trying to get the first 6 guys in the batting order, going to be more difficult. I find it more difficult to do infield with infield than outfield with outfield for what it's worth. Typically, you can still fill those priority positions in the infield with an outfield prio stack, but it is much harder to fill the like a double outfield with 2 infield stacks. That's more difficult. So that would be the way that you look at it, and you can use that information in the hand builder as well, right? Like if you wanted to say like test out different combinations, that's what you would do. You'd look at this and you say, can I fit Washington and Seattle? And we know that we kind of can.
We kind of did, but maybe we didn't do it optimally.
Right. Maybe it made more sense to go, instead of doing Washington and Seattle, maybe it makes more sense to do something like, Washington and the Yankees, right? Maybe that makes more sense. Maybe it makes more sense to do the Angels with the Cubs or something, right? Testing out those different kind of combinations, I think, is good. When you combine that information with the ownership information and like building lineups towards certain volatility ranges, that's when you start winning. That's when you really start kind of taking off.
Yeah, great. Well, James, thank you for doing this. We'll do it again. And I guess I should say thank you for doing it again, because you've gone over this stuff with us before. But to keep doing it with repetition is really important to us. And it shows people just the power of these tools, right? So check them out at TrueDFS.com after you like and subscribe. You get access to the PayDirt model. You get access to SaberSim Sheets' projections, Goldie's projections. There's a lot of great stuff there. So thanks for doing this again. And we will certainly be there for more in the future. And of course, we're going to have Bobby Fi and Sheets coming on in a half hour to do a live before lock. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. I'd love to be on them. I'm going to have you guys over at PayDirt to do some content too here pretty soon. So
yeah,
always love doing this kind of stuff. Obviously, if you would also like more of my stuff, you can find it over at PayDirtDFS.com and join the Discord. Discord's free to join. It's a lot of fun. We talk about video games and other DFS related things that are not DFS related things. So anyway, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
TrueDFS.com, PayDirt, DFS.